this day, we got the message from many people all of a sudden that Ishwar Kaka had passed away. So as soon as we got that message, Guri and I got together in our room and we said, let's meditate. And we sat down and we just meditated for a little bit. We opened our eyes and we said, should I go? Should we go? Should we help from here? What should we do? And just then, exactly at that moment when we had that thought, I get an email from a friend of mine. He says, I feel moved. I can't go, but I feel moved to have you go. And here is a ticket. And get on the next plane and go to India. And so I came. And it was pretty profound to be here. I was here just a couple days after December 26th. And I remember on the 13th day, we all came here for the first time. We were sitting outside in the morning. It was quiet. And a lot of people had gathered. It was the first time Jayesh Bhai was also coming back to Safai Vidyalaya. As most of you know, this was Ishwar Kaka's temple. This is where he did his sadhana. His sadhana manifested as sanitation work on the outside, but as we've heard from many people, it was also on the inside. And so it was a privilege to be here on that 13th day. And as we were sitting down, I looked at the trees and I said, I had this thought that wise people are the ones that are able to connect the branch tips to the roots. So many of us just look at the fruit on the branch tips and say, this is what's valuable. So many of us are able to look a little deeper and say, well, the fruits wouldn't exist because of the branches. But very few people start to look even deeper than that and say branches wouldn't exist for the trunk if it wasn't for the trunk. And the trunk wouldn't exist if it wasn't for the roots. And the roots and this whole entire tree wouldn't exist if it wasn't nourished by so many different things. So Ishwar Kaka was one of these people that had the capacity to look at the fruit and go to the roots. On many occasions, he would tell people. I remember this one time in particular, where there were all these young, educated, fancy kids, and they came and said, they didn't say it in so many words, but essentially the essence of it was, look, old man, you don't understand. This is a much better way to do it. And there was a certain logic to their thinking. But Ishwar Kaka said, the problem with your thinking is that you only see what's on the wall. You can't see what's behind the walls. Which was to say, you're only looking at the fruits. You can't see to the roots. So it's not going to be sustainable. It looks like a good idea, but it's not going to work. And Ishwar Kaka had this capacity to repeatedly bring it down to its essence. It's a very rare capacity. Thich Nhat Hanh at one point was in an assembly and he takes out a piece of paper and he says, what do you see here? And everyone said, I see a piece of paper. And he says, where does the paper come from? And he says, it comes from a tree, somebody said. He says, what does the tree need to survive? And someone said, water. Where does the water come from? The clouds. And then he turns to everybody and he says, how many of you can see a cloud in this piece of paper? That was that same quality of connecting the branch tips to the roots. How can we see the cloud in every piece of paper? How can we look behind the walls? And that was something that to me, I had the good fortune of meeting Ishwar Kaka and spending time with him. That was something we saw. And so today, we've invited a few friends. We have one more of our colleague flying in. He should be here anytime. So we want to share, what does it mean to give respect to such people who have served humanity and who have changed themselves by that process? You give respect to what? To the body? Not really. To the work? Yes. But much more than that, to the values. So how do we understand these values? So the question today for all of us is, what was a value that we took from Ishwar Kaka? And or one or more that we saw, and how have we tried to incorporate it in our lives? So I want to tell you a couple of them which I thought of. The first one is, I guess in Gujarati, now I've been speaking a lot of Gujarati, so I'm starting to think in Gujarati. Sometimes I go to Guri, we usually speak in English, but I think one time it was like middle of the night or something, or she woke me up, and I started speaking to her in Gujarati. "Na, atyaar nahi, thodi bar bachi." And she's like, "What?" So I've been thinking in Gujarati, so here are the three things that I thought of. The first Gujarati word is sahaj, effortlessness. Ishwar Kaka was really, you can even say sarava, very fluid, very effortless. It wasn't sticky. You know, sometimes you pass through certain corridors and it's clean, it's empty. And sometimes you go and it's like everything just kind of sticks to you. With Ishwar Kaka, nothing stuck. You could just go through, very effortlessly. He had Anarben, I don't know how many of you guys have heard this story. It's a remarkable story. When Jayeshbhai and Anarben got married, early days, Anarben, it was her responsibility to do kachra and pota in the house, to sweep first and then to mop. And that one particular day, she was very sick, but she still had to do it. And she wasn't up to it, but she still had to. And so there was this tension. And she does it. It's very hard for her. She takes out the broom and she starts sweeping, because that's what is expected. And Ishwar Kaka, at one point, she turns around and notices that Ishwar Kaka is behind her with the mop. Very uncommon, particularly in the Indian culture, for the father-in-law, a male, to come and be humble enough, and silently. They never exchanged any words. Just silently, he did it. And at the end, she finished the sweeping, he had finished the mopping, puts the mop away, and they never talked about it. That's the kind of effortlessness, sarava. You just do it. He felt called to do it, and that was it. The second thing about him that I'll share, it was one of his favorite words in Gujarati, actually. It was suvecha, which means may be happy. It's a form of that. So when you effortlessly do this, you can only be not sticky, you can only be effortless in service if, or rather when you are effortless in service, you can only think good of others, because you don't want anything for yourself. And when you don't want anything for yourself, you see how deeply interconnected you are. And so you just think good for other people. And so he would always say, Suvecha. My friends in US, I met these two people, these elders, Wind Eagle and Rainbow Hawk, these Native American shamans. And they said, we want to give a blessing. They called him Jayesh Bhai Jayesh. We want to give a blessing to Jayesh Bhai. Because just spiritually, they felt connected to Ishwar Kaka and Jayesh Bhai. And they said, what should we say? And I told them, just say, Suvecha. In fact, Audrey, you have met them, or you heard of them. You saw the video. Yeah. It was so cute. One of them has passed away now even. He was an old grandfather. And there was a spirit to Ishwar Kaka saying that. And he would always be in that mode. Even there was a dog and a cat that lived, coexisted. And they would go on a morning walk with him every day. So even animals felt his surecha. So it's very deep. And then the last thing, I guess they all start with a sa. Sahaj, surecha. And last thing is very simple to say, but very hard to practice. Shanti. He had a sense of peace. For so many people, sages tell us that how you die is an expression of how you have lived. And if you look at how Ishwar Kaka passed away, it was incredible. Suresh was with him the last 3 months. Not just with him, by his bedside for 3 months. When you go up, climb up on the top of the hill, you're huffing and puffing, you're running out of breath. And then you go up to the top of the hill and you finally catch your breath. He was like that, except he never got a chance to catch his breath. 24 hours of the day. For the last 12 days. He was just out of breath, that's just how. And yet, completely at peace with it. And at one point, I think Jayesh Bhai or Suresh asked him, because they had 12 punctures on his body. And they couldn't get fluid inside him. And so they had to cut open a slit on his neck. Very painful to watch. And they said, can we do that? We just need to give you anesthesia. And he says, no, I don't need anesthesia. You go ahead, cut whatever you want. And so these people asked him, I said, what's going on? It's like you're running out of breath. You're asking them to just cut you open, aren't you? Doesn't it hurt? And he says, very beautifully, very poetically, he says when a coconut is not ripe, you can't separate it out, its outer core and inner core. But when it gets ripe, it's very easy. This is the outer core and the inside purity is there. And I'm connected just with my mind. You can do whatever you want with the body. I've spoken with the doctor. The doctor said in all his decades of practice, he has never seen such an example. And he not only passed away smilingly, but as soon as he passed away, they called everyone. All the family, close family members. They were all around. And his wife, naturally so, is in tears, Vasudhava. And she says, for so many years, every single time we have departed, you have said, Jai Jalaram to me. When you have that. How can you go without saying Jai Jalaram to me? Body is dead. The meter's flatline. And everyone is looking at Vasudhava and saying, no, it's okay, it's okay. He's passed away. Don't cry. He won't say Jai Jalaram. And just then, he opens his eyes. He smiles. And he says, Jai Jalaram. They all heard it. They were all there. He was a man in charge of his body. As Gandhi would say, you're a trustee. Who is the trustee? He was connected to that which is the trustee of this body. We sometimes misidentify. We think this is us. But actually, we are just trustees. And that space in which we are trustees, that's what he was connected to. And when you're connected to that, there's a sense of peace. Although there's so much chaos in the world. So these 3 words, to me, summarize the spirit of Ishwar Kaka. Sahajta, Sarota, Suvecha, and Shanti. And so we've come together here in his place, in his home, in his temple, in his place of cultivation. And his spirit is here. His spirit is alive and well. it's an honor to meet all of you here in that space. We may have met before, but perhaps not in this way, in this spirit. So thank you all for holding him in that sacred part of you.